Okay, let's unpack this. When we talk about the internet, we usually talk about cloud services,
Hmm.
seamless apps, and, the beautiful weightlessness of digital data. But the profound, inescapable truth is that all that weightlessness sits on a foundation of incredibly heavy, very expensive physical real estate. If you really want to understand the modern digital economy, you have to look down. You have to look at the concrete, the steel, and the power grids. So our mission today is to dive deep into the global infrastructure giant that owns those physical foundations, Digital Realty.
And for those of you who are looking for, let's say, the shortcut to understanding the invisible yet entirely physical architecture that runs everything from your favorite streaming service to global finance, this is absolutely essential. Digital Realty is a massive company, but its core identity, financially speaking, is what we call a real estate investment trust, or a REIT.
A REIT.
Yeah, they're essentially the world's most powerful landlord for digital operations. They don't just invest in data centers, they own, they operate, and they build them all across the globe.
And I think that phrase, landlord of the cloud, it almost undersells the complexity of what they're offering, right? They aren't just renting out empty warehouses.
Not at all.
Their business model is layered, and I think understanding those layers is really the key to grasping their value. They offer three critical services. First, there's the raw data center provision. That's the building, the land, the power infrastructure.
The basic real estate component, yeah?
Exactly. Then second, they offer colocation. This is where thousands of clients, from tiny startups to major corporations, rent dedicated space, cages or racks for their servers inside that massive building.
And that's where it starts getting interesting, because now you're moving beyond just a pure real estate play. But the third service, and our sources call this perhaps most critically, is interconnection services.
This is the real premium offering.
It is. Interconnection is that vital linking of all the different networks, the carriers, the cloud providers, inside their facilities.
Okay, let's use an analogy here because this is where the money is really made.
Yeah.
Think of a standard data center as a huge multi-story office building.
Yeah.
The data center provision part. That's the structure itself.
Mm-hmm.
Colocation is like renting one of the offices in that building. But interconnection services, that's like turning the lobby of that building into the single most important trading floor or transportation hub in the entire city.
That's a great way to put it.
The value isn't just in the space you're renting. It's in the ability to instantly connect to every other major network player who's also set up shop in that exact same building.
Exactly. That interconnection piece is the glue. It's the network effect baked right into the physical structure. It turns what is essentially a large warehouse full of cooling systems and servers into a vital communication nexus.
Right.
And it's what makes a facility carrier neutral, which means clients can connect to any network they need instantly without having to run expensive, complex lines all across town.
And if you want that immediate aha moment, the thing that really sets the scale for this entire deep dive, it's this. As of June 2023, Digital Realty manages over 300 facilities.
300.
Spanning more than 25 countries. We are talking about a globally distributed physical matrix that underpins huge portions of the digital world. It manages data pathways across every major continent. This isn't just a company. It is quite literally a foundational utility of the modern internet. So let's start by grounding this in the financial world, because this company isn't just a major player in infrastructure. It's a powerhouse, and it's recognized at the highest levels of the economy.
Yeah.
Digital Realty is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, ticker is DLR, and it's a component of the S&P 500.
And that S&P 500 status is really important for you to know. It signifies stability and, market importance. Investors look at them less like a volatile tech stock and more like a utility.
Right, like a power company.
Exactly. A provider of essential services that benefits from long-term predictable rental income. They are the definition of mission-critical infrastructure. The moment the global financial system recognizes that the concrete foundation is as stable as the utilities that power it, you've moved into a totally new tier of business.
And their core business model as a REIT, that real estate investment trust, it really influences how they operate, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Unlike a standard tech company that might reinvest all its profits back into R&D, REITs have to distribute a significant portion of their taxable income to shareholders. So that structure demands a specific focus on asset value and, efficient acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see that play out in their history.
It dictates their focus completely. Their primary mandate is to own and accumulate high-value physical assets that generate robust long-term lease income. That's why their financial footprint is so telling. When you look at the 2022 data, the numbers are just immense.
Let's look at that sheer scale. So in 2022, their revenue hit US $4.69 billion. Their net income for that same year was US $2.47 billion. Those are big numbers. They show strong profitability. But the figure that truly captures their identity as this physical infrastructure giant is the total assets. We're talking US $153.32 billion.
And that asset figure, the $153.32 billion, that is the single most important piece of data here. It's what distinguishes them. A tech company might have a huge market cap based on, future promises or some kind of intangible intellectual property.
Right, it's all potential.
Digital Realty's value is primarily tangible. That $153 billion is the physical embodiment of the cloud.
And just to help contextualize that for you, $153 billion is a staggering amount of fixed capital. It represents the sheer volume of land they own, the concrete structures, the specialized cooling systems, the power infrastructure, and the thousands of miles of fiber optic cables they house.
Yeah.
We're talking about an asset base that's comparable to the infrastructure budgets of mid-sized nations, all of it dedicated to just holding the world's data. It's a little demonstration of how much capital is tied up in keeping the digital lights on.
It also tells you something really crucial about their competitive moat. I mean, building a $153 billion global network of highly specialized facilities, that isn't something a startup can just go out and do.
Right.
This scale creates a barrier to entry that very few competitors can ever hope to overcome. It just solidifies their dominant market position.
And operationally, they're adjusting to that immense scale. They announced back in January 2021 that they were moving their headquarters to Austin, Texas, to centralize their global management. And to run this whole intricate global network of over 300 facilities and manage those hundreds of billions in assets, they employed 3,450 people as of 2023.
And managing a distributed portfolio across 25 countries requires deep, specific expertise. It's not just about facility management. It's about micro-level energy sourcing for efficiency, global logistics for equipment, complex regulatory compliance. I mean, you have to manage local politics, local power supply, local climate issues everywhere from Virginia to Singapore.
And speaking of management, let's quickly look at the leadership that's steering this powerful convergence of real estate and technology. You've got Mary Hogan Pruce serving as chairman, providing that strategic oversight from the board level, and Andrew P. Power as the CEO and president who's guiding the day-to-day operations and the growth strategy. Their decisions directly influence how data flows around the world. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this sets up our next segment perfectly. How does a company that is, at its heart, a real estate investment trust become such a central, indispensable player in global tech? They didn't invent a new chip or a new search algorithm. The answer isn't in some revolutionary software. It's entirely in their history and their relentless, calculated, and frankly, opportunistic strategic acquisition strategy.
It's a masterclass in market timing. They recognized early on where the true lasting value resided in the digital explosion. It wasn't in the transient software applications that come and go.
Right.
It was in the space, the power, and the connectivity infrastructure that houses all that computing power. They understood that location still rules, even when you're dealing with data.
So let's go back to the beginning. We can begin with what we might call the founding bargain, which was established back in 2004 when Digital Realty was formed by GI Partners. And that initial strategy, it wasn't about building from scratch. It was about taking advantage of market turbulence. GI Partners strategically contributed 21 data centers that they had acquired through bankruptcy options and from distressed companies.
And that phrase, distressed companies, that is the golden nugget here. They weren't paying top dollar for brand new cutting-edge facilities.
No.
They were buying mission-critical pre-existing facilities when their previous owners, often, telecom or dot-com firms, were collapsing under financial pressure. Our sources indicate these properties were acquired at a significant discount, 20 to 40% below replacement cost.
Just think about the massive advantage that gives you. You start your entire global infrastructure empire with core assets that are instantly cash flowing, they're already operational, and you got them at a 20 to 40% discount.
Yeah.
This provides an immediate, tremendous capital efficiency and a low-cost debt foundation right out of the gate. It just sets the stage for really aggressive growth.
And that initial low-cost inventory made their public debut highly attractive. The initial public offering, the IPO, happened on November 4, 2004. They started small by today's standards, 23 properties, about 5.6 million square feet. And the original founders, GI Partners, they realized their returns pretty quickly. They sold all their shares by March 2007. They had successfully created a stable, asset-heavy public entity.
Okay, so after the IPO, their strategy transitioned. It went from that opportunistic distressed buying to more highly targeted strategic purchases, mostly domestically, filling out the map in key metro areas.
Yes, you see a focus on key domestic hubs early on. For example, in 2006, they acquired a property in Phoenix, Arizona, which is a major Western hub, for $175 million. Then by 2010, they're targeting the Northeast, acquiring 3 data centers in Massachusetts and Connecticut for $375 million. These were geographically strategic buys meant to create network density.
And crucially, they engaged in a very sophisticated financial maneuver. It's called a leaseback transaction. And this is just a brilliant strategic tool. A major corporation, which needs to free up capital but still needs its data center to run its business, sells the facility to Digital Realty, but immediately leases it back under a long-term contract.
It's a win-win financial strategy for the seller, like a Delta Airlines. They get immediate, massive liquidity. They can take, $37 million or $63 million off their balance sheet and refocus on their core business, which is flying planes.
Right.
And for Digital Realty, they immediately gain a high-quality operational asset that is 100% leased back to a blue-chip tenant on a secure long-term contract that generates instant, predictable rental income.
And we see clear examples of this. In January 2012, they used a leaseback to acquire a 334,000 square foot data center near Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport for $63 million. A year later, April 2013, they acquired Delta Airlines' data center in Eagan, Minnesota for $37 million, structured exactly the same way. They essentially became the specialized permanent custodians of mission-critical physical infrastructure for some of the world's largest companies.
And this approach allowed them to scale their footprint so rapidly without the development risk or the lengthy ramp-up time that comes with new construction. They were just acquiring mature operational facilities with clients already locked in.
But then this strategy shifted entirely around 2015. The era of buying individual buildings gave way to the era of buying entire companies. This period, which lasted 2022, this is the true inflection point. This is what defined Digital Realty as the dominant global infrastructure giant. This is when they aggressively scaled their global capacity and, maybe more importantly, those crucial interconnection services.
This transition from buying assets to acquiring massive competing platforms is the textbook blueprint for achieving global dominance in a consolidating industry like data center real estate. They weren't just adding square footage, they were buying market share, network density, and geopolitical presence.
So let's break down these mega mergers a bit because each acquisition served a really distinct, specific strategic purpose far beyond just adding physical space.
Yeah.
So first, there was the push for interconnection density. In October 2015, they purchased Telx for $1.886 billion. This was not a real estate deal, it was a connectivity deal. Telx was a leader in network-dense environments.
Acquiring Telx was basically Digital Realty saying, we want the highest value real estate. And the high value centers aren't always the biggest, they're the most connected. Telx brought that cross-connect density, the ability for multiple carriers and enterprise users to link up seamlessly inside the facility. This made their portfolio stickier.
Stickier.
Yeah, meaning clients couldn't easily leave because if they did, they would lose these vital low-latency connections to dozens of other key players.
Okay, so that's interconnection. Second, the move for hyperscale dominance. In September 2017, they consolidated the domestic market with the acquisition of DuPont Fabro's technology in a colossal $7.8 billion deal.
This was crucial. This was so crucial because DuPont Fabro specialized in the massive custom deployments required by the world's largest public cloud providers, the likes of Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. By acquiring DuPont Fabro's, Digital Realty solidified its position as the top provider for those huge wholesale deals. It ensured they captured the unprecedented growth of hyperscale computing. They weren't just serving general clients anymore, they were serving the companies building the next layer of the internet.
And third, what we can call the global gateway strategy. And this is arguably the biggest move they ever made. October 2019, they announced the acquisition of the European provider Interxion for an astonishing $8.4 billion. At the time, this was described as the biggest data center transaction ever.
That price tag, it raises an interesting critical question. Was spending $8.4 billion on Interxion really the best strategy? Or did that massive price tag and the debt that came with it put them at risk? The answer, I think, lies in the immediate market leadership it provided. The source material says the goal was to create a leading global provider of data center, colocation, and interconnection solutions. Interxion had a deeply entrenched, highly networked footprint across Europe, especially in key markets like Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and Paris.
So they weren't just buying facilities, they were buying instant, unassailable market access and network density across an entire continent. The cost of trying to build that network organically would have taken a decade and risked missing the immediate growth window. That premium price they paid for Interxion bought them market dominance overnight and cemented their global status.
And this global expansion continued into emerging markets. The fourth, future-proofing. In December 2018, they acquired Ascenty for $1.8 billion, which immediately gave them 8 operational data centers in Brazil, marking a major presence in Latin America. Then, in January 2022, they continued the strategy by acquiring a 55% stake in Terraco data centers, providing a critical foothold into Africa.
So what this entire timeline reveals is not a company that just waited for opportunities to fall in their lap. This is a company that actively shaped the competitive landscape through aggressive, highly capitalized consolidation. They recognize that in the digital age, scale begets scale. The larger your network, the more indispensable you become to global commerce.
And yet, even as they were buying up all these existing built-out facilities, they never stopped planning for raw future capacity. We see this in their proactive land acquisition strategy. In November 2015, they purchased 125.9 acres of undeveloped land in Loudoun County, Virginia, for $43 million.
And Loudoun County, for anyone who doesn't know, is often called Data Center Alley. It's the absolute prime beachfront property of the data world. Buying 125 acres, there wasn't a small hedge. It was a commitment to future hyperscale demands, with plans for a colossal build that would yield 2 million square feet of data center space. It shows they were thinking simultaneously about immediate mergers and decades of organic, build-to-suit growth.
They understood that they needed that physical space to capture the contracts from the hyperscalers who demand facilities designed to their exact specifications. This combination of opportunistic acquisition and calculated organic growth is what allowed them to reach that $153 billion asset valuation. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can transition now from financial scale to environmental scale. While Digital Realty is focused on powering the digital economy, this focus presents massive, almost existential environmental challenges. Data centers are enormous energy hogs. They consume phenomenal amounts of electricity for the actual computation, and often even more electricity just for cooling those thousands of hot servers.
That's the irony, isn't it? The more powerful and dominant they become, the larger their carbon footprint grows. The sheer scale of their power demands puts them front and center in the global conversation about corporate sustainability. And as a result, the company recognized this responsibility. And in 2020, they joined the Science-Based Target Initiative.
And this is a really crucial move because it moves beyond vague corporate promises and into specific measurable promises, which is what the informed listener really cares about. These are hard, decade-long targets based on their 2018 baseline.
Okay, let's break those targets down because they are distinct. The first major target focuses on reducing Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by a significant 68% between 2018 and 2030.
And this is their most controllable area. Scope 1 covers direct emissions from sources they own or control, like the diesel generators they run for backup power. Scope 2 covers indirect emissions from the electricity they purchase, which is the vast majority of their power consumption. A 68% reduction here means they have to dramatically improve energy efficiency across their entire fleet and, critically, source huge amounts of clean energy.
But the harder challenge, I would think, lies in their second target, reducing Scope 3 emissions by 24% between 2018 and 2030.
Oh, Scope 3 is the elephant in the room for every massive corporation. This category covers all other indirect emissions that happen in the value chain outside of their direct control. So think about the emissions generated during the manufacturing and transportation of all the specialized IT equipment they buy, the embedded carbon in the concrete used to build their facilities, their employees' business travel. Achieving a 24% reduction in Scope 3 requires deep operational changes, not just in their facilities, but across their entire global supply chain. This is a mammoth undertaking.
And beyond their own internal metrics, Digital Realty is also actively trying to shape the industry's approach to the problem. They are a prominent signatory of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact.
This pact is a fascinating study in self-regulation. It's a voluntary initiative developed in collaboration with key European bodies. including the European Data Center Association and the cloud infrastructure services provider in Europe.
And the ultimate goal of the pact is to push the entire industry in Europe toward climate neutrality by 2030. For Digital Realty, engaging in this kind of self-regulation is a strategic hedge against future, potentially stricter government regulations. By proactively setting high standards, they get to control the regulatory narrative.
And we have concrete proof points that their commitments are being executed. In July 2023, Digital Realty received a certificate of conformity, specifically certifying their adherence to the self-regulatory initiatives set out by the Pact for their operations across Europe. That's a significant marker of progress and compliance in a jurisdiction that is generally much stricter on environmental performance.
So the non-negotiable goal driving all of this is the renewable energy transition switching entirely to renewable power sources. And our sources indicate that many of their U.S. and European data centers are already powered by renewable energy. That's a huge achievement, considering the data centers demand absolute reliability, which historically favored stable, non-renewable baseload power.
The scale of this renewable procurement is astounding. I mean, let's measure the physical impact they've committed to. They have 1 gigawatt, that's 1 GW of wind and solar projects under contract across multiple U.S. states, including major energy markets like Texas, Illinois, North Carolina, Oregon, Arizona, and Virginia.
A gigawatt. That's a colossal amount of power. To put that in perspective for you, a single gigawatt is roughly the output of a major large-scale nuclear power plant. It's enough to power hundreds of thousands of homes. To contract that capacity solely for data center usage requires signing complex long-term power purchase agreements, or PPAs, across diverse regulatory environments and different electrical grids. That is a massive logistical challenge. It requires deep financial and legal muscle.
And their commitment is truly global. It extends beyond the U.S. grid. They've also invested in local, installed capacity in different locations around the world. They have 1.8 megawatts of solar panels installed in various global locations, including Kenya, Greece, Switzerland, and South Korea. This decentralized effort reduces their reliance on local grids where robust renewable options might not be widely available yet. It demonstrates a commitment to both global operational resilience and their environmental goals.
And all these efforts lead to measurable results. Digital Realty reported that in 2022 alone, they avoided the emission of 1.8 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. That's roughly the equivalent of taking hundreds of thousands of cars off the road for an entire year.
And it connects back perfectly to that core operational challenge. When you are sitting on $153 billion worth of infrastructure that requires continuous, intense energy input, sustainability stops being an optional feature. It becomes a fundamental core business necessity. The ability to procure green power at the scale of 1 GW is not just about, saving the planet. It's about stabilizing their long-term operational costs and mitigating massive regulatory and reputational risk.
So now we have to pivot a little. We have to go from the sheer scale of their assets and their environmental commitments to the inevitable frictions that are inherent in managing critical global infrastructure. Because even the most successful, most massive companies face internal scrutiny and external operational failures. And Digital Realty is certainly no exception.
The first reality check comes from the highest legal authority in the United States, and it reveals some crucial tensions regarding internal corporate oversight and employee reporting. We're talking about the 2018 Supreme Court case, Digital Realty Trust, Inc. v. Summers. This case provided a really stark look at the risks of corporate malfeasance and the challenges of employee protection.
So the conflict, it stemmed from a former Digital Realty employee, Paul Summers, who was fired after complaining internally. And his complaints were serious. He raised concerns about the elimination of certain supervisory controls within the company and, critically, the hiding of cost overruns on projects. Summers believed he was protected from retaliation by the whistleblower provisions of the Dodd-Frank Act.
And this went all the way to the Supreme Court because it raised an incredibly important legal question. Are employees protected by federal law when they report potential fraud or misconduct only through internal corporate channels, or do they have to go straight to the regulators? The stakes were high for corporate governance everywhere.
And the Supreme Court ultimately ruled in favor of Digital Realty. It was a significant victory for the company, but a really challenging precedent for employees. The court cited the specific wording of the Dodd-Frank Act, ruling that the whistleblower protections only applied if the employee had first notified the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC.
This ruling created a massive cultural and ethical tension. It essentially told employees across all public corporations, if you witness potential misconduct, reporting it solely through internal channels, say to your manager or HR, that might be what your company policy dictates, but it offers you zero statutory protection under Dodd-Frank if you are subsequently retaliated against or fired.
That just raises such an important question about the effectiveness and, frankly, the legal safety of relying on those internal corporate reporting mechanisms. If legal protection requires you to go external, it fundamentally undermines the whole goal of corporate governance, which is to fix problems internally before they become public scandals. It forces an employee to choose between loyalty to the company and their own legal safety. And the Supreme Court decision firmly resolved that tension in favor of requiring SEC notification for protection.
It also demonstrates the complexity of maintaining oversight in a company with $153 billion in assets and constantly managing massive construction projects with tight budgets and deadlines. That environment naturally creates pressure points where corners might be cut or controls might be temporarily eliminated, making the need for robust, legally protected internal reporting mechanisms even more critical.
Okay, so moving from abstract legal risk to concrete physical risk, we need to talk about a recent critical operational failure, one that perfectly demonstrated the fragility lurking just beneath the massive scale of Digital Realty, and that was the fire at their Singapore data center in September 2024.
This event serves as a classic case study in systemic fragility. A single localized physical incident in one facility had cascading global repercussions. It showcased the absolute interconnectedness of the digital world that Digital Realty helps create.
So the incident occurred on the morning of September 10, 2024, at their Loyang, Singapore data center. The cause was specific. The fire involved lithium-ion batteries housed in battery rooms on the third floor. Now, lithium-ion batteries are standard for providing backup power. They ensure the data center stays running for a few minutes while the backup generators spin up.
But these batteries are a known fire risk if they're not perfectly manufactured or maintained or cooled. The fact that the fire occurred in a battery room, the very place designed to ensure power resilience, is particularly unsettling. Digital Realty did confirm that employees were safely evacuated without injury, which is a major positive outcome from a really dangerous situation.
But the immediate aftermath reveals the danger of having all your critical eggs in one highly connected basket. What's so fascinating here is how a localized physical incident, a battery fire in one building in Singapore, can cascade and disrupt multiple major global services across continents.
The domino effect was immediate and severe. It affected incredibly high-profile clients. It severely affected the systems of major e-commerce and media clients like Lazada and ByteDance. But the most critical failure was that the incident took down Alibaba Cloud's availability zone C in Singapore.
And taking down an entire availability zone for a major cloud provider like Alibaba is a massive failure. It means all the redundancy that clients of that specific zone had built into their systems was instantly lost. Other major high-profile companies that were also possibly affected included DigitalOcean, Coolify, and Cloudflare.
This single event just underscores the immense non-negotiable responsibility of these carrier-neutral facilities. When a core interconnection point goes down, whether it's due to fire or flood or cooling failure, the disruption isn't contained to one small user. It creates a critical single point of failure that ripples instantly through the systems of multiple high-profile technology giants, proving that no matter how much money you invest, the systems are inherently fragile and reliant on the physical safety protocols of a single battery cell.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? A company with $153 billion in assets that facilitates global weightless commerce can be momentarily brought to its knees by a single faulty lithium-ion battery cell in a concrete room thousands of miles away from its headquarters. That fire serves as such a stark reminder of the physical stakes involved in managing the internet. So what does this all mean? When we put all the pieces together, the founding bargains, the strategic mega mergers, the massive sustainability commitments, and the operational failures, Digital Realty's story is really a profound tension between the physical and the digital. They are a massive, aggressive consolidator and manager of physical real estate that $153 billion in assets that powers the weightless, intangible digital world of cloud computing, streaming, and global commerce.
Their growth story is a narrative of ruthless, calculated efficiency. They leveraged a low-cost initial entry into the market by acquiring distressed assets. Then they transition into executing these massive mergers to achieve global scale and capture vital interconnection services. But this gargantuan scale comes with significant and non-negotiable responsibilities. It demands massive renewable energy commitments to meet their environmental footprint, and it demands absolute operational integrity, where even a small failure in a battery room can immediately bring down major global cloud availability zones.
The essential takeaway for you, the learner, is this. Digital Realty is not a technology company. They are a real estate and power utility that holds the keys to the digital kingdom. For a company dealing with assets valued in the hundreds of billions, the margin for error is effectively zero. Any seemingly small operational failure like that lithium-ion battery fire in Singapore can have massive immediate global repercussions, directly hitting multiple high-profile internet companies and underscoring how dependent the entire digital economy is on the physical integrity of these facilities. They are the unseen pillars, powerful but also vulnerable.
And that leads us to a final, provocative thought, drawing directly from the very beginning of their story. Digital Realty was founded by acquiring distressed properties at a significant 20 to 40% discount during the early days of the internet boom. Given the current explosive demands of artificial intelligence, high-performance computing, and exponential data growth, the need for new physical space is higher than ever. So, is the era of cheap, opportunistic infrastructure acquisition truly over? Or are there new, distressed digital assets out there, perhaps legacy cloud facilities that aren't optimized for new AI workloads, underperforming regional centers, or niche providers that just lack the scale to compete, waiting for the next massive REIT to snap up and consolidate at a bargain? Something for you to mull or explore on your own?